They gave you his story, painted a picture, but not the truth. Books were burned, paintings were cut, lives were lost, but the truth lives on. And you are watching Black History Decoded. We are going to play with the idea of the wet nurse concept of the 1800s and how it could theoretically relate to the orphan trains of that same time period. Historically, we were told that a wet nurse was a slave that nursed the children of their slave master, so the biological mother would be free of the work involved in nursing their own child. Some would believe that the slave was depriving their own child of milk to fill the duties of nursing an additional baby, but we know that is not true. We do know that women are capable of nursing multiple children at once. The fact is, women who are currently pregnant or nursing a child can spontaneously produce milk through a human phenomenon called non-pubertal induced lactation, where a woman begins to create breast milk by caring for another baby. Previous generations were quite aware of this, and it was notably stated in Islamic culture and all over the world's history. There are a few reasons why I want to play with the idea of a link between the wet nurses and the orphan trains, because there's a few things that stood out to me while researching old photographs of wet nurses. There is a lot of misinformation painting the slave narrative and the wet nursing that I must point out. Also, with my research on orphan trains, there is a ton of missing information that allows us to find missing links through photographs and/or literature. If you haven't heard of the orphan trains, I will explain very quickly what it was and what was happening at that time. In 1851, in New York State, the Orphan Aid Society was one of many organizations that were assigned to gather homeless children and ship them all over the U.S. via the orphan trains. From 1851 to 1910, the orphan trains were packed to the limit with white children from the ages of 1 month to 12 years old. These children were shipped all over America starting in 1851 and picking up heavily 30 years later around 1881, which is also the start of the Industrial Revolution in America. The children were marketed towards farmers and other business owners with all the traditional adoption-like settings, except these kids were sent to work and background checks were just your neighbors saying that you're a good person. There's not much photography that I can find on the orphan trains other than seeing kids hanging out the train window or maybe just a group of them gathering boarding the train. There are a few pieces of artwork depicting the the orphan trains at a stop with people gathering around the station waiting to meet the kids right at arrival. But this is not how it worked. The kids were shipped in, and once in town, they were cleaned up and participated in an orphan distribution at a town venue, quite similar to what we would see in an artwork depiction of a slave auction. So the various arts depicting a train station full of white Americans ready to receive their orphan children fresh off the train is highly inaccurate. In fact, the only picture that I was able to find with adults anywhere near these trains is this one. This is the photo of 3 women on the tracks walking up to a freshly arrived orphan train. If you look at the dresses the women are wearing, you can get an idea of their lifestyle. If you look at the skin tone of the mystery women, you will see quite a bit of color, but the photograph is a little bit blurry, but I digress. I must note that I haven't been able to find any photographs of the babies that were on the orphan trains. I've only been able to find the children who were of the child labor age. Some of the child laborers at the time have been known to work as early as 3 to 4 years of age. There is a lot of controversy surrounding the wet nursing by Black women in America. What if they were only nursing the children because they were the adopted parents of these children? Looking at all the photos, we can see that these women love these children. But why are these so-called slaves taking so many pictures with these white babies and the parents are not? There was supposedly no written history for a slave, but somehow we have these slave poems and memoirs that tell stories from a slave's perspective popping up in the late 1980s and hereafter. One that truly stood out was this one. A slave master had mandates that prohibited the white baby to suck from the same breast as the Black baby because it would be like them drinking from the same water fountain. But drinking from the typical water fountain wasn't around prior to the abolishment of slavery in 1867. In fact, the first water fountain in America, the Pro Bono Publica Esto Perpetua, was constructed in Fairmount Park, Philadelphia in 1904. This was not your typical water fountain, but more like a public well that pulled waters from the local mountain springs. It was for humans, pets, and horses. The first water fountains consisted of straight shooting spouts and sometimes included a chained connected public cup that all drinkers would use. The drinking fountain terminology started as sharing the cup, more opposed to sharing the fountain. Public drinking fountains like the one we use today were invented in 1888 by the Kohler Company, but were not commonly used until around 1910 with the ban on the original water fountain style due to the spread of diseases at the fountains. It also led to racial segregation at the fountains with fear of the risk of disease from outside races. So this slave master mandate is total misinformation due to the fact that the fountain didn't even exist. Let's get back to these wet nurses. I have questions. I have a lot of questions to be exact. But the question I want answered is, where were the parents? Where exactly did these children come from? Why were there so many homeless children and babies in New York at the time? Why were slave wet nurses even a thing? Why would Massa allow his child to drink the milk of a so-called slave if it was believed at that time that by drinking the milk of a woman that you would take on the essence of her bloodline? Why did wet nurses take pictures with the white babies as if it were their own children? Why did slaves have pictures with the babies, but the parents didn't? Why are there so many slaves dressed in more expensive clothing than the so-called Massa's child? Why are wet nurses taking family pictures as the child grows past the nursing age? Why are there so many old Black couples with these wet babies? Why are there male slaves taking pictures with these children? They can't be wet nurses. Once again, where are the parents? I plan on making a part 2 to this video with some of the probable answers to these questions, so please subscribe to my new YouTube channel, and I look forward to bringing you part 2. Thanks for watching. Peace.